Here's what's coming up on your horizon. Local poultry producers are holding their breath, hoping an avian disease that has hit other states hard won't make it here. We'll look at how biosecurity measures could turn that hope into reality. Is Oklahoma's oil and gas industry on the brink of a recession? We'll examine what that could mean for our state's larger economy. We'll meet a young Oklahoman whose interest in math was sparked in a welding class. And we end our day with a recent graduate who was able to cut her college costs one snip at a time. Stay with us for Oklahoma Horizon.
Oklahoma Horizon is made possible by the Oklahoma Department of Career and Technology Education.
Oklahoma's investment in career tech provides more than nationally recognized technology education and training. It produces solid financial returns for the state's economic future. Oklahoma Career Tech, elevating our economy.
And the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping good people grow good things. And now, from the Career Tech Studios in Stillwater, here's your host, Rob McClendon.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us here on Horizon. Well, the worst avian influenza outbreak in U.S. history has hit 14 states, 2 of those neighboring Oklahoma. Over 24 million birds have either died from the flu virus or are set to be killed to try to contain the outbreak. And while the H5 avian flu strain poses no threat to human health, it is threatening the economic health of poultry producers. Here's our J.D. Roseman.
The strain of this virus is a cousin to an Asian avian flu that has been brought to both Europe and the U.S. by migratory birds. While the disease poses a very low risk for humans contracting it, poultry producers have been greatly affected. Millions of birds have been euthanized trying to stop the outbreak.
We take every precaution we can, so prevention is the key.
Brent Bolin is a poultry producer in Idabel, Oklahoma, and says if infected, the virus can devastate an operation.
That would limit my income for however long that would be, maybe a couple of months or 6 months at the most. And we're in a real tight margin business anyway, and so we'd have to have a good conversation with our banker if that were to occur, to stay in business.
Michael Herron is Oklahoma's assistant state veterinarian and says this strain of avian flu seems to affect only domestic birds.
It is very deadly to the domestic poultry. It's a virus that is adapted very well to wild waterfowl, causes little to no illness in those animals, but in domestic poultry, and turkeys seem to be a little more susceptible than chickens, but it will cause near 100% mortality in a flock.
Yet with heightened biosecurity protocols, industry professionals hope to contain and stop the virus from spreading.
Biosecurity within your own flock would be controlling visitors, knowing the visitors that come if they have exposure to poultry, and then practicing simple steps as cleaning and disinfecting boots and equipment and supplies as you enter a poultry pen. And then our job at the Department of Agriculture is if there's an affected flock, a domestic flock, then we manage that flock and eliminate that from spreading to other domestic flocks.
While many poultry producers contract with larger companies, Bolin says he believes the Oklahoma market could benefit from the outbreak.
My personal opinion is in Oklahoma, it's actually helped our market because some foreign countries or some other countries we do business with, they will take Oklahoma products as long as the avian flu is not in Oklahoma.
And while other U.S. producers may have lost entire flocks, Bolin believes this outbreak won't ground them for long.
Farmers and ranchers are resilient, and we take pride in raising the most economical, safest product in the world, and as long as we continue to do that, then I'll keep my head high.
Now, once again, consumers have nothing to fear, as affected birds will not make it anywhere near the food chain. All birds are tested for avian flu prior to butcher, and there are strict biosecurity measures put in place to protect both the consumer and the producer. And according to Dr. Heron, consuming wildfowl that may be infected poses little to no risk as long as everything is handled and cooked properly. Food safety really isn't the issue, but rather trying to protect farms from contracting this virus and wiping out their entire flock.
Thank you, JD. Now, when we return, when it comes to our economy, is history repeating itself?
You're watching Oklahoma Horizon, featuring some of the good things that are happening in the great state of Oklahoma.
Well, the latest news from the energy industry is in, and it's not good. First quarter earnings are down for at least 5 of the major oil and gas companies. Notably, Phillips 66 earnings shrunk by 37%, ExxonMobil's fell by 46%, while Shell took the biggest plunge, down by 56%. Now here in Oklahoma, Chesapeake Energy's profits dropped by 19% from the first of the year. Continental Resources posted a 42% loss in their first quarter, while Sandridge earnings were down by 51% from this time last year. Tough times. That has Oklahoma's Independent Petroleum Association warning of a recession similar to that of 2008 and 2009, which many believe will be reflected in the latest unemployment numbers released later this month. Earlier, I visited with Chad Wilkerson of the Federal Reserve Bank about energy industry profits and the effect they could have on our larger economy. So, Chad, can the current state of the energy industry be described as finding a new normal with diminished expectations?
I think that may be a fair characterization. Prices have come down a lot, and some international factors, OPEC in particular, seems content with them staying lower for a bit longer. So I think firms are beginning to recognize that and take some actions to be successful in a somewhat lower price environment.
And I think we should note here before we move on to the larger economy is we have seen a fairly historic realignment of where we get our energy, with more of it coming here in the middle of the country.
That's right. We've seen a huge increase in oil production in the United States. We're now the biggest oil producer. And all of the growth in world oil production for the last 4 years has come from the United States, and more specifically from the part of the United States between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains, so right here in our region. So we are less dependent on foreign oil than we have been in a long time.
Looking back over our economy, does this current downturn, does it remind you of anything that we've seen before?
It does. We actually did a piece at the Fed a couple of months ago in our Oklahoma Economist publication comparing this oil price downturn to previous ones in Oklahoma. And there actually have been 6 other downturns of prices significantly like this one since 1980. But in looking at different aspects of those different downturns, one sticks out as the most similar to the current case, and that's the downturn of 1985-86, which I think worries some Oklahomans a bit. And why it's similar, one reason is it occurred outside the context of a U.S. recession, so it wasn't because U.S. demand was falling. It was driven more by a decision by OPEC to not cut their production when prices fall, and they've actually stuck to that. That's been a surprise, just like it was back in 1985. And then another similarity is that prices weren't rising before the downturn. Most times when oil prices fall sharply, they had just risen in the 6 to 12 months before that. That wasn't the case this time. The things that are different, though, from 1985-86, one key one for Oklahoma is that unemployment back in 1985 was already well over 7%. So workers that lost their jobs then didn't really have many other opportunities. Today, Oklahoma's unemployment rate is under 4%. So some workers who have been laid off, I know personally, have already found jobs in other industries. The key unknown as to whether and how much this will look like 1985-86 is how long prices stay low. That was the big problem then, is that they fell and then stayed low for a long time.
Is it fair to expect for the people that may have lost jobs that we will see our unemployment rate rise here in the state?
I think that almost certainly will occur, and I think one leading indicator of that we're already seeing is that new claims for unemployment insurance have jumped since February. So the last couple of months they've been running about 30% higher than they were a year ago. So almost certainly that will result in Oklahoma's unemployment rate rising by several tenths in the next month or two, actually.
Now, to the casual observer, our economy, at least to me, feels different than in the mid-'80s. Is that correct?
It is. Another couple of differences that I didn't mention earlier. One is how the energy sector is financed. Back in the 1980s, a lot of the lending was by small banks and to small firms. The sector now is much bigger, I think more sophisticated, the energy sector itself, and how it acquires funds is different. It's much more from capital markets, private equity, large banks. That doesn't necessarily make it less risky, but it makes it less potentially damaging to Oklahoma communities that had many banks very heavily involved in oil and gas lending back in the 80s.
You know, the pain that the energy industry is feeling right now, could that be beneficial to other sectors of our economy?
It could to some degree.
In terms of workforce?
In terms of workforce, definitely. We've heard for the last 4 or 5 years now reports from manufacturers, construction firms, services firms looking for IT workers, could not find the workers that they needed, and would sometimes blame the energy companies who were able to pay more than they were. So I already know anecdotally, personally, several folks who've been laid off from energy companies and have found work at other firms that need their skills and have been needing them. So again, that's perhaps a silver lining that wasn't there in the 1980s because our unemployment rate is so low. Now that said, the energy sector is so large and so high paying in the state that as jobs are cut, those workers, if they do not find reemployment, that's lost income for the state. And we're already seeing industries such as manufacturing, construction, beginning to see some slowing in retail sales as a result of lost energy jobs. So there's both positives, but also some negatives.
In knowing what you know from the things that pass across your desk, what are some of your best forecasts as we move forward through 2015?
For the energy sector?
For the energy sector and for our overall economy, if you would. Yeah.
Well, for the energy sector, prices have come up a good amount in the last month or so, oil prices. That's been driven by, I think, some reduced concerns in the Middle East, although there's been the unrest in Yemen lately. It has also been driven by how rapidly firms cut rigs in the U.S. and therefore production would start to slow. We're just beginning to see that. As I mentioned, the flows into Cushing have just begun to slow in just the last couple of weeks. So as that supply falls and if demand stays where it is, then prices should continue to increase. Now, one factor that might keep them from increasing too much and perhaps even dip again is many of the wells that have been drilled over the past 6 to 9 months have not been completed, so the oil is still in the ground, and it wouldn't take much for that oil to flow again once prices rise. So once prices get up to a break-even level, or maybe slightly above, those wells might be completed and increase supply and keep prices from rising much in the near future. So that, I think, will likely keep a damper on certainly growth in the energy sector the rest of this year, and there probably is more declines to come. And that will make it, I think, difficult for Oklahoma as a whole to grow economically in 2015. And then beyond that, what happens with oil prices depends on a lot of things, most of them out of our control. What happens with OPEC, how content they are with keeping prices low, how strong the world economy grows, in particular places like China and India that have been growing very fast and have seen slightly lower growth and thus lower demand for petroleum. And then also how efficient the energy sector becomes itself. If it continues to make these efficiency gains, it may be able to be a profitable growing industry at lower oil prices than we would have thought a year or two ago.
Will the gradual resurgence we're seeing in the national economy, will it help here in the state?
It should. Definitely we're seeing, late last year at least, we saw very strong growth in the U.S. economy. The first quarter GDP numbers for this year were somewhat weak, but there were several, I think, temporary special factors holding that down. Weather this year again was colder than normal, especially in highly populated parts of the country. There was the port disruption on the West Coast that slowed shipments, slowed sales. There should be some rebound from that. And then also somewhat related to the oil issue is that the lower gasoline prices you would have thought would have spurred consumer spending. We have not yet really seen that. And we have seen an increase in the personal savings rate. So it seems like most Americans have saved much of their gasoline savings from the past 3 to 6 months. But that money is there to spend in the future. They may just be cautious about how lasting that windfall will be. But if it becomes clear that it's going to be lasting, that could provide a boost to spending in the U.S. and then also to Oklahomans who have also been benefiting from lower gasoline prices.
You really can't say Federal Reserve Bank without thinking about interest rates, and there's been lots of talk, and really the past year and a half, that these historically low interest rates we're seeing could be on the rise, but we've yet to see it. What do you think the future holds for us?
Well, I always have to be a little careful in talking about rates as a Fed official, but the Fed has been more, I think, transparent about that than we used to be. And the members of the committee, the Federal Open Market Committee that decides those things each quarter, now releases their own forecast for the federal funds rate, the overnight rate that the Fed controls, for the next several years. And in the last projections made in the first quarter, 15 of the 17 members of the committee thought that interest rates would start to rise sometime in 2015. I think there's a good amount of debate about when and how fast, but pretty close to a consensus that rates will start to rise sometime this year. And the U.S. economy appears to be growing at a rate that may be able to absorb that. And inflation also appears to be at a level to be able to absorb that.
Well, I'll leave you with the question that I always ask you if you're riding up in an elevator with someone and they ask you, so what's going to happen with our economy? So what's going to happen with our economy?
I think Oklahoma is going to go through a bit of a tough patch, or at least a slow patch here in 2015, because the energy sector has gotten so large and so high paying and the layoffs are relatively sizable. That's difficult for us to fully absorb in the short run. But like I said, I think firms are becoming more efficient. I think we have good opportunities in the state, still low unemployment, and I think can be positioned well for the future.
All right. Chad Wilkerson, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Still to come on Oklahoma Horizon. Cutting college costs with skilled work. But first, technical education for homeschoolers.
Well, parents homeschool their children for a myriad of reasons. And while the State Department of Education does not keep track of those students instructed at home, what we are seeing is a growing number of them enrolling in technical programs at a career tech. Joining me now is our Courtney May.
Many homeschool students do exceptionally well in their studies, yet the hands-on aspect of learning can be limited due to the expensive price of technology. For Jordan Dancer, learning to weld sparked his interest in math.
The attention to detail is the biggest thing, and one of the things about welding is because it is a skill, you don't really realize in a lot of ways how much practice you have to have.
Dancer is one of a growing number of homeschool students attending career tech to learn a skill.
We couldn't afford, a $5,000 welder out there. There's equipment like that. We couldn't furnish really anything I could do to weld at here, but because of the career tech and the community dollars, they're able to fund those programs and help out with opportunities like that.
Learning both technical skills and soft skills, so important in the workplace.
The homeschool kids really do well, and not just in my program. I think they do well in all the other programs.
Richard Ferris is Dancer's instructor and says homeschooled students appreciate the value of learning.
They are very respectful, they're very intelligent. They are always in the top percentage of my students.
The curve and the x-axis.
Hard work that's paying off for Dancer.
And it come back to this.
Now majoring in math at the University of Science and Arts in Chickasha, Dancer has earned more than $46,000 in scholarships. Thanks to a love of math he first discovered with a welder's torch in his hand.
During his time at Canadian Valley Technology Center, Dancer earned 12 hours of college credit and was a student ambassador for Skills USA, a successful journey that all started when he was just 16 years old.
So Courtney, I am curious, what sparked Dancer's interest in the welding program?
Dancer says he wanted to try something that was completely out of his element, and welding was just that. And ironically, Dancer says he developed his love for math in that class and eventually wants to become an engineer because of the interest he gained from welding.
All right. Thank you so much, Courtney.
You're welcome, Rob.
Now, if you would like to learn more about some of the challenges homeschool students do face, we have an in-depth story on homeschool education in Oklahoma streaming on our website under our value-added section. Want to share something you've seen here today? Well, all of our episodes are streaming on our YouTube channel at Oklahoma Horizon TV. Or you can subscribe to our weekly free podcasts on iTunes. Well, it's no secret the cost of college has skyrocketed in recent years. And while an odd job here or there certainly can help students with the bills, there's a big difference between working minimum wage and having a skills-based career. Our Andy Barth introduces us to a recent graduate who's trimming up her tuition bill with some skills she learned while still in high school.
With a piece of tin foil and some dye, stylist Allie Dorr is transforming hair.
We are doing highlights. So she has some blonde down here and some outgrowth, and we're just touching that up. Lots of outgrowth.
Dorr got her start in high school at Francis Tuttle Technology Center. An opportunity, she says, put her ahead.
I thought that job was... Francis Tuttle was there talking about the options, and you can do this as a junior through high school and be graduated with a skill.
A skill that Dorr says helped her work her way through college, earning a degree in business marketing and entrepreneurship.
My dad owns his own business, so I decided that I would eventually open up a salon and to have a degree as a backup plan just in case.
And for Dorr, the training at Francis Tuttle was key in her success.
It was a lot more hands-on. There was some in classroom work, but we were able to have real clients, paying clients that got to come in and we could work on them. We were also allowed to work on our friends in class. So it was more of a trial and error versus just definition like high school.
And for client Mindy Anders, she came all the way from Kansas to get her hair done.
Allie did my hair while I was in school down here probably 3 years ago. And so it's been a year and a half since she last did my hair. And so coming through Oklahoma, I could not miss the opportunity to do this. I mean, I called 2 weeks out to make sure I got an appointment today.
And in Dorr's experience, it's the soft skills that matter most to clients.
Most of why people come back to you is personality versus the skills that you do, because, I mean, essentially, there's other good hairstylists, you know, so people come back to you for you. So to just kind of learn how to interact with people.
And Anders says Dorr is more than just a stylist.
Allie, she's so comfortable to talk to, and it actually surprised me to find out she's actually younger than I am. And so, but I relate to her very well, so it was an easy choice to stick with her.
And for Dorr, achieving her goal is like doing hair, one piece at a time.
My dad always told me that, you know, you take small steps towards your big plan, and so that's just what I'm doing, and I'm finally almost there.
That has helped Dorr pay for college and prepare for life after graduation.
Has the weather been nice down here? Yeah.
You can keep up with us throughout the week. Just head to okhorizon.com, where you can see more of any of our stories, read our reporters behind the scenes blogs, see what others are saying about us on Twitter, and face the facts with our regular updates. So reach out and touch us anywhere and anytime. Next time on Oklahoma Horizon, we mark Memorial Day week with a conversation with best-selling author James Bradley.
There had been a lot written and done about Iwo Jima, but nobody knew about the flag raisers, and I knew that because I grew up with one of the guys. You know, I knew how much the public did not know.
Flags of Our Fathers on Oklahoma Show for the Heartland, Oklahoma Horizon. Well, that is going to wrap us up for today, but you can see more of any of our stories on our website at okhorizon.com. You can listen to us on the go with our weekly podcast on iTunes. Follow us throughout the week on Twitter at OKHorizonTV, or just become a Horizon fan on Facebook. Now, I'm Rob McClendon. Thanks for including us in your day. We hope to see you back here next week.
Horizon is made possible by the Oklahoma Department of Career and Technology Education and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping good people grow good things. Thank you for watching Oklahoma Horizon.